Why did you decide to become a lawyer?
No, that's an easy one. When I was in high school, one of my favorite radio programs probably then was what was the name of the guy who won all of the cases as a defense lawyer and later became a television star?
Perry Mason?
Perry Mason,
Perry
absolutely.
Mason.
I thought that was the cat's meow, and decided I wanted to be a lawyer right then and there. And that was really the start of it, right? Went into pre-law, majored in political science, went to law school, had no idea what law school would be like. Turned out that I liked it. And in the law practice, I had no idea what that would be. And it turned out I liked that too, so it was a good choice.
And not only did you serve as a United States attorney, you also served as corporation counsel for the city of Chicago. I think it's very interesting that you were in the private practice and had these other more public service jobs. Can you reflect on the significance of serving in those different capacities? I
would say, first of all, the significance of the U.S. Attorney's Office was that for the first time I was able to practice law in the grand manner. We had tremendous FBI agents, Secret Service agents, who were trained investigators and who would bring us cases that were well prepared, and it made our jobs a lot easier. So I learned how to try cases in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I went there with the intention of coming out in a couple of years because I really had loved the practice. And it turned out that they were about to give me a raise, and I said, let me get out of here now. So I left at 18 months because I figured if I gave me a raise, I might hang in there a little longer. So that was a great experience. But the years between the U.S. Attorney's Office and '83, when I became Corporation Counsel, I was basically doing criminal practice. As far as the city and government was concerned, I knew very little about it except how to serve them with summons and sue them. And so when I got into the Corporation Counsel's office, it was a totally new experience. It was an experience where I learned all about government. I was sort of dumb on the issue of politics. I even learned politics while I was there because it was sometimes politics and government go hand in hand, if not all the time. So those were good years, and it gave me the the inspiration to try and do something other than criminal work. And so I had pretty much started to transition into civil work. Started doing some defense work, and then ultimately exclusively plaintiff's work.
Tell me about one or two cases of which you're particularly proud.
Oh, boy, I have to go to, first I'll go to crime. we in 1968, when Dr. King was murdered in Memphis, and they had the riots all over the city of Chicago, on the west side, south side. There was a group called the Garfield Organization, and they were basically community activists who engaged in legal activity, leafleteering and so forth. They were sort of a thorn in Mayor Daley's side, and so when this occurred, there was an undercover police officer in the organization. And it turned out that these kids apparently got a little bit upset with what happened. And the story goes, and I'll say this story, they allegedly went through the community, picked up some bottles, and got some wicks, went downtown, got some gasoline, and systematically set fires on 7 different structures. And simultaneously with that, one of them was a photographer, and he would, as soon as the fire got into a conflagration, he would photograph it. So when they were ultimately arrested, the photographer had fled, leaving at his home, hanging in his dark room, the film from the fires. So the prosecution had a sequential set of photographs of the fires that the office undercover officer was testifying that he was present when all of this occurred. So we put Gene Pincham put a team of lawyers together, including myself and about 4 or 5 others, and we sat in his basement trying to figure out how we were going to try and manage this trial. So his suggestion was first that we take, let's use the defense of entrapment. And that was sort of foreign to me. It sounded to me like a plea of guilty. So we discussed it. So we said, well, let's just play it by ear and see what we can do. Sure enough, we started the case out. He put the officer on the stand, and of course he testified in very intricate detail about a number of things that occurred on that evening. And so on cross-examination, Gene Pincham asked him, in effect, he says, on the day following Dr. King's assassination, where were you? He says, I was at the Garfield organization's office at Garfield and Madison. Well, while you were there, did there come a time when there was a white woman who pulled up to the stoplight and some thugs went over and opened her door and pulled her out of the car and tugged her and was pummeling her? And he said, yes. He says, and did not the defendant, Fats Crawford, go over and rescue her from those thugs and take her to the waiting arms of the police? He said, yes. And he said, well, what did you do? He said, well, I was on a ladder putting a purple and black flag over the doorway of the Garfield organization's office in commemoration of Dr. King's death. I was protecting my cover. You did nothing? That was the end of the case. It was amazing. One of the things that law school taught me was that the law was a noble profession. I had no idea that it was a tough business as well. So when I started practicing, that's how I looked at it. And, you know, one of my heroes was Thurgood Marshall. And I had sort of followed his career while I was in law school, read a lot of the cases that he had handled and taken to the courts of appeals and the Supreme Court. And so I think they called people like him at that time social engineers. And I thought that was really what a lawyer's role was, that you really should try and do something to make society better.
You mentioned that you have children who are lawyers. What words of wisdom do you give the young lawyers?
You know, 2 things. Be a part of the community where you live, whether it is serving on boards, whether it's serving on committees, whether it's serving in block clubs, because people, you know, I tell them lawyers are a dime a dozen. You can be as very skillful as you want to be, but if people don't know you and don't respect you and don't see you, you know, they're not likely to hire you.
I actually think that that advice also helps to elevate our profession in the eyes of the public.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is so meaningful because people depend on lawyers in these volunteer organizations. I mean, I must say that the most rewarding thing to me has been involved in the organizations that I've been involved in. I get calls and referrals that go back to the times that I served in things 10, 15 years ago, and of course currently. So yeah, I think service to the community is something that I would advise every lawyer to do, because it's necessary. We have skills that they need, and if we don't volunteer and do some of that stuff, you know, it's good for you and it's good for the community.